Oh, hello! Hey everybody, I'm Wes Barker, professional magician, and I am here to tell you 3 stories, and they're about the 3 stupidest magicians I can possibly think of. Quick note, unfortunately, all of these stories have a tragic ending. Just letting you know that up front, okay? So if that's not your bag, sign out now. But there's lessons to be learned here, and I think those are the important parts. Let's jump into it with no particular order, except I did specifically pick this order. Number 1, Joseph Burrus. This happens in 1992, where 32-year-old magician Joseph Burrus claims to be the next Harry Houdini, but greater. Literally, he said that. That's what he claimed. He was going to do one of Houdini's greatest escapes, being buried alive. And this was going to propel him to stardom and fame, and he'll be more famous than Harry Houdini, so he believed. Now, what went wrong? This guy got himself handcuffed and put into a coffin. A homemade coffin. A homemade coffin, which was see-through. It was made of plexiglass. So, people could see him inside. He's handcuffed, put inside his homemade coffin, and lowered into the hole in the ground, the grave, lowered into the grave. He's 6 feet down. They cover him with 3 feet of dirt and another 3 feet of wet concrete. This totals over 7 tons. Think of the weight, because I don't think he did. There is a crazy video of this thing that I saw years ago and I have not watched since, and I'm not gonna link to it. That's just, it's too much. You can see them, they lower him in there, they put the dirt on, all this wet concrete over top, and as soon as it sort of fills up, the truck pulls away and you see the whole thing just sink. It just goes, whoosh. It is the most gut-wrenching scene of all time, seeing that thing just, whoosh. Apparently the crowd could hear the cracking of the plexiglass. The ground crew, they're working their ass off. They're digging them out, trying to get them out, right? But you're trying to move 7 tons. It's too much. It's so deep, it's so thick, it's wet, it's heavy. Unfortunately, they don't get there fast enough, and Joseph Burrus dies. Now, I understand the desire to want to be famous and propelled to the heights of Harry Houdini himself, but you gotta do your research. I'll save you watching this video. The homemade coffin, you can see when they're lowering it in there, it's kind of flimsy. You can see that it's flimsy. This guy is, by all accounts, an actual magician. He's been doing it for a long time, but that doesn't make you an engineer. That doesn't increase your understanding of structural integrity. You're not a physics expert. If you're going to do crazy things, you have to hire experts to help you do them. It's a proper tragedy, and it could have been avoided. And I have more to say about this topic, but let's just wait a second, because I gotta talk about the next guy first, because then it'll kind of make sense. Number 2, Janaka Basnayake. This guy's a Sri Lankan magician that moved to the US in 2010. In 2012, he attempts this great stunt, which sadly becomes his last stunt. He too is going to attempt to be buried alive. This one is slightly different. His idol here is David Blaine. And he's not trying to do the Harry Houdini buried alive escape. He wants to set a Guinness World Record for the longest person to ever be buried alive. Now in 1999, David Blaine stayed buried under the ground for 7 days. So that's the number this guy has to beat. How long was Janaka buried for? 7.5 hours. What went wrong here? Well, when David Blaine attempts a stunt, he does all the research. More research than anybody. He literally goes to the best of the world and whatever that topic is and literally gets them to help him do it. That's how he does it. And even then, it's highly dangerous. This guy did not do that. Janaka's coffin didn't break the way Joseph's did, okay? In fact, Janaka had a very sturdy coffin, but that's all he had. He didn't have any way of having air or water or food or any way to survive a week. He just had his family bury him 6 feet in the ground. They put the dirt on. And 7.5 hours later, they had to dig him up and take him to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. Now, when David Blaine attempts something like this, David Blaine's coffin is fully prepared. He has a way of having oxygen get pumped in. He has liquids in there to survive on. You see him, he has a pillow and a blanket. He's ready to be there for 7 days. And even then, it's an impossible feat. Janaka didn't have any of these things. He didn't think it through. By all accounts, Janaka is actually a magician, so it's hard to imagine what he was thinking. He had to know that he didn't have superhuman powers. And he had to know that you can't survive a week without water and food, let alone trapped in a box with no air supply. He had to know. And if he didn't know, you have to ask people. This is the idiocy I'm talking about. You're going to risk your life doing a stunt or a trick, but you have never talked to the people that would be experts about that thing. It doesn't make any sense. And this is why it's crazy. Sorry, you can tell how passionate I am about this. I get a little heated and flustered by it because it's so annoying and sad because it could have been prevented. And in Janaka's case, there's one more crazy thing here. That is that the Guinness World Records, the record he was trying to break, doesn't even recognize the record for being buried underground the longest. They just won't accept that as a record because, in their words, it's way too dangerous and they don't want people attempting it. Literally, Guinness World Records does not have this record because they're trying to prevent exactly this kind of thing from happening. This brings me to my big point about Joseph and Janaka. Both of them. Had this gone exactly the way they planned, literally to the T, perfect the way they planned, they would have emerged from the ground and in their minds to fame and fortune and glory. That's not what's going to happen. Think of what year it is, 1990, 2012. There's so many people out there doing incredible things that you're not going to do this one stunt in your backyard and pop out and all of a sudden become a world-renowned famous guy. It's just not going to happen that way. You're risking your life, and even if it goes perfectly well, your outcome is no change. You'd be the same magician after as you were before. Back in Houdini's day, maybe if you're popping up the ground in 1915, yeah, you might have gained some notoriety. Or if you're David Blaine and you've been killing it forever on all the major stages all around the world, TV everywhere, yeah, of course you're going to be famous. But one little stunt in your backyard or whatever is just not going to do it. Don't risk your life for it. And if you're going to risk your life for it, consult the experts. Gah! Sorry, I digress. Man, wow. I saved the craziest for last. This story is wild. It's crazy, and it's so worth it. The Great Lafayette. This happens May 9th, 1911, okay? Now you're saying, Wes, who's the Great Lafayette? Well, let me tell you, back in the day, he was the highest paid performer of his time. He was making something like 50,000 pounds a year, which is like a multimillionaire now for sure. It said to book him back then, it was a 10-year waiting period to book him. That's how booked up he was. As famous as you can get. Now I have to tell you this quick little part. It sounds like a tangent, but it's not. He has a really good friend. You might have heard of him. His name's Harry Houdini. Yeah, he was really good friends with Harry Houdini. Harry Houdini gifted the Great Lafayette a dog. The Great Lafayette loved this dog. He loved it more than anything in the world, okay? This dog meant everything to him. And he had this dog for 15 years. Sadly, the dog died May 5th, 1911. But the show must go on. So the Great Lafayette takes the stage May 9th, 1911 in Edinburgh, a huge theater filled with 3,000 people. And he's doing his show and he is killing it. It is going extremely well. Now, about halfway through the show, one of the lanterns he has as decor up on the stage here sets the curtain on fire, okay? Now, the audience doesn't freak out right away because the Great Lafayette was known for his special effects and going over the top, spending all the money to make these things just amazing and wonderful and impossible. So they see this fire and they're just like, oh, this is amazing. So no one's really freaking out yet until the fire spreads across the curtain and the top curtain falls down and sets everything ablaze on the stage. That's when people know, oh, I think we better go. The whole place gets evacuated and they did a great job. There's 3,000 audience members and they all got out. That's pretty good, you know, for when a theater's on fire to get everybody out. But 10 people still died. Who were those people? This is where the idiocy comes in. All of the Great Lafayette stagehands died. You know why? That's because he had locked them in. He had locked all of the doors backstage. So the stagehands, they couldn't get out. The reason he locked them is he was afraid someone might try and sneak in and see how his illusions work and steal his ideas and his methods and stuff. It's so crazy to me. You think someone's going to steal your methods? Your precious little magic tricks? 10 of your stagehands died because they couldn't get out because of a fire. Now, I'm speaking to you from 2020, where emergency exits, fire exits, they just exist by law. So maybe that's why we have these laws, is because of mistakes like this in the past. But it seems so much like common sense, I can barely wrap my head around it. But this story's so far from over. So the 3,000 audience members, they all get out safely. Awesome. Very happy to hear about that. The Great Lafayette also makes it out, unharmed. But he turns around to go back inside. You're saying, oh, Wes, he's going back inside because he's trying to save his stagehands and unlock the door and he knows they're trapped back there. No, he's going back to save his horse. He had lots of animals in his act, tiger, horse, all this stuff. This horse is a very valuable part of the act. Forget the 10 stagehands he has back there. He's going back to save his horse. And sadly, he does not save the horse. The horse and him both perish in the fire, along with all the stagehands. But the story's still not over. It gets crazier. The fire burned for several hours. And finally, after it's all done, they start uncovering people and, unfortunately, pulling out bodies. They pull out the Great Lafayette. There he was, next to the horse. A tragedy by all measures. Now they have a funeral for the Great Lafayette. Harry Houdini made sure it was a big thing. A horse-drawn carriage with a huge parade. 250,000 people turned out to show their respect. And they buried the Great Lafayette with his beloved dog. That's as good an ending as anyone could hope for. But the story has one more crazy, wild-ass, weird-ass, insane twist that makes it almost perfect for a magician. back at the site of the burnt theater. They were obviously still clearing the debris, and I mean, it's a huge theater that burned to the ground. It's gonna take a long time to clean up. So they're clearing debris and everything, and they're pulling out pieces. The normal procedure when a building burns down. And they pull up part of the burnt out stage, and underneath the stage, they find the burnt up body of the Great Lafayette. What? The Great Lafayette. His body is under the stage. There's two Great Lafayettes? Yeah. The one they found before was not the Great Lafayette. It was his double. Back in the day, a magician like the Great Lafayette would use a double or a look-alike to pull off some of his amazing feats. I vanish from here, I reappear here, and possibly because he had a look-alike. Just like out of the movie Prestige, if you've ever seen that. So they buried his look-alike with his dog. So after they identify the guy under the floor as the real Great Lafayette, now they have to go back to the burial plot and they have to dig up the other guy and put him back in, so now he's with his dog. It's a crazy ending to a crazy story. And the reason it's in the stupid list is because it could have been prevented a couple of ways. The first way is, don't lock your employees in a place they can't get out. The only way I would forgive the Great Lafayette for doing this is if there had never ever been a theater fire by that point. But there definitely had. There've been some super famous theater fires by that point. So you know it can happen. So don't lock your employees in a room. That's number one why you're on the stupid list. Number two is if you make it out, don't go back in for your horse. It's a fire. Fires don't give a shit. Do not go running back in a burning building. Come on, that's step one with fires. You get outside, do not go running back in that burning building. Let's just don't do that, okay? You just can't. Don't be dumb. Don't be an idiot. That's 3 stories, each just as stupid, crazy, and sad as the one before it, but there are lessons to be learned. I hope we learned them. Seriously, don't risk your life in hopes of being famous. Do your research. Don't lock people in a room. Don't go back in after the horse. So many key points. I hope you found this as intriguing as I did, and hope to see you in the next video. You're probably wondering, Wes, if this story is so insane, so wild, and he was so famous, why don't we know about it? I'll tell you why. Enjoy, take care. If you're a magician, well, don't kill yourself. Thanks for coming out. See you guys in the comments. Later.